So another kind of case that we handle at Mammoth and Rosenberg are what is called trip and fall or slip and fall cases. And if you're going to talk about them more formally, they're called premises liability cases. That occurs if somebody doesn't properly shovel their walk and there's a snowstorm days before and they leave it icy and you slip and you fall and hurt yourself. Or that occurs if you go to a supermarket and they have all these displays that are all over the place that are designed to take your attention away from the floor and from walking because they want you to buy stuff. And they're making money by selling you more stuff. So if they let something on the ground that causes someone to slip and fall, they're responsible for that. So the dynamics of a slip and fall or trip and fall case are that somebody was negligent in taking care of an area, a supermarket floor, stairway in a house, properly shoveled sidewalk, and so on. If they're negligent in taking care of that, and their negligence results in you being injured, you're entitled to be compensated. So we had a case about a year or so ago that was hotly contested. What happened was my client was shopping at a store that had a parking garage. So she parked her car in the parking garage, she exited a car, went into the store, bought whatever she wanted, came out of the store, and was injured when she tripped over this parking barrier. That's the device that prevents a car from rolling forward. And she severely injured her knee and severely injured her shoulder. Our position was that because the parking area was dimly lit and because the barrier wasn't painted with a different color that would have made it more obvious, and because there was no route marking clearly delineating where she should have walked, that the garage was responsible for it. So it was hotly contested because they claimed that they were not at all responsible for her injuries. She should have seen where she was going. Well, that's true. You got to understand that she was carrying packages. You got to understand that in this particular garage, cars were going back and forth, and she had a lot to worry about. Had they properly delineated a route or marked a route from where she was parked to where she was going, that would have been helpful. Had they taken these parking barriers and made them a bright yellow that you see out in public, that would have been helpful. They claimed that there was a route that was specifically marked, but no human being could figure that out. So the case went into litigation. We did a lot of depositions, a lot of work, and we took the matter to trial. And we were able to convince the finders of fact, the jury in the trial, that the company who owned the store and the parking garage were responsible for injuries. And so this lady who was, I think, in her 70s and whose golden years were severely compromised and who had tens of thousands of dollars in bills and no ability to work anymore, we were able to positively affect the quality of her life. And I'll tell you what, that garage, a month after the case concluded, had a route marked and had those parking barriers properly colored. And that's another positive thing to what I do, because we can affect positive change that will help people that may have had the same misfortune had we not helped the other person. Litigating a case requires filing a complaint, a list or a statement of what happened, what was negligent about what the person did, what the injuries are, and formally filing a lawsuit. And when you file a lawsuit, you've begun a process. And the process involves different things. There's the exchange of information, which is done through written questions called interrogatories that both sides send to the other. It's done by something called a request for production of documents. That is a list of documents that both sides request from the other side and then are produced by the other side. After that, generally, there are depositions done. A deposition is a question and answer session with one of those people that have one of those fancy gizmos that take down all the information, recording every word being said under oath. And those are powerful tools that can go a long way as the case develops and as you go to trial. Deposition is a question and answer session with one of those people that have one of those fancy gizmos that take down all the information, recording every word being said under oath. And those are powerful tools that can go a long way as the case develops and as you go to trial. So we recently had a case involving a property owner whose sidewalk was raised considerably because a tree on their property, the root system displaced the sidewalk. It's a common occurrence. I would imagine that most people who see these kinds of things or have seen these kinds of things. But in order for a root system to drive up a cement slab on a sidewalk substantially, that takes years and years and years. And that means that the property owner had notice for years and years and years. In this particular case, the property owner was a ski resort, and the area where this occurred was an area that was commonly traveled by thousands of people every day. And what they did is they repaired it, but they did it in a haphazard fashion. And so as a result, the repair was worse than the disjointed sidewalk. My client was walking down the stairs. It was very crowded because this is a highly congested area. Her foot got caught in this, what remained was a hole. She fell forward and she tore the labrum in her shoulder, completely tore it. And it was her dominant hand, and it caused her a lifetime of problems. So we litigated the case against the ski resort, and were able to obtain a very good result for my client. And again, that defect in the property was repaired. And so the thousands and thousands of people that have walked over that area since then have probably been benefited by what happened. If there's a defect on a property, it depends who owns the property as to what can be done. If it's a residential property and there's a residential landowner, or even if there's a landowner that's not in the house because they rent it out, they're still responsible for maintaining and making sure that property is safe. So it's their responsibility to maintain that sidewalk, to shovel that sidewalk in the wintertime, to make sure there are no egregious areas of rises or falls, to make sure the property is properly lit so that in the evening there's no danger to anybody walking by. If a municipality owns the property, then there's a whole other issue that's triggered, because in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, you can only sue municipalities under certain circumstances. And they stack it very difficult against the person that's injured because it's called sovereign immunity. The king can do no wrong. It actually comes from English law. And in effect, the municipality is saying under what circumstances you can bring a case. For instance, in Philadelphia, you have to have a permanent injury. You have to have a certain amount of medical bills incurred as a result of it, and it has to fall into one of the exceptions that are specifically laid out as to whether you can bring a case or not. If a municipality owns the property, then there's a whole other issue that's triggered, because in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, you can only sue municipalities under certain circumstances. And they stack it very difficult against the person that's injured because it's called sovereign immunity. The king can do no wrong. It actually comes from English law. And in effect, the municipality is saying under what circumstances you can bring a case. For instance, in Philadelphia, you have to have a permanent injury. You have to have a certain amount of medical bills incurred as a result of it, and it has to fall into one of the exceptions that are specifically laid out as to whether you can bring a case or not. So our practice is pretty robust, and I mean, I've tried cases in Florida if I've had to. We were litigating a case in Virginia where you can get admitted to other jurisdictions. It's called pro hac vice is the Latin term for it. But when I do that, I like to also have a local attorney who understands the way the locals run their courtroom or the judges react, because an out-of-towner who's coming into a jurisdiction can really get homered, meaning can be less respected than somebody else who's there frequently. You know, what are these people doing in our courtroom kind of thing. But we handle cases all over Pennsylvania, all over New Jersey. Those are the two primary places we do it, and we do it in state courts and federal courts as well. So if you're involved in a trip and fall or a slip and fall case, it's important that you take the right action. First of all, make sure that you're okay. Obviously, if you're not okay physically, you get the medical attention you need as immediately as possible. Preserving yourself is obviously the most important thing. But also documenting what it was that caused you to fall. If you have your cell phone, take a picture. Also documenting where you fell in relationship to where the defect is or the thing that was dangerous that caused you to fall, maybe a shot of what property it's on so that you can figure out ownership down the road. And then also you should call your attorney and see what other steps should be taken when you're able to do that. I'm reachable 24/7. I mean, I'm very appreciative when my client doesn't call me at 3 o'clock in the morning. However, if they need me, they have an opportunity to get a hold of me because my accessibility is very important to me because it's important that my clients get their answers when they need them. I'm reachable 24/7. I mean, I'm very appreciative when my client doesn't call me at 3 o'clock in the morning. However, if they need me, they have an opportunity to get a hold of me because my accessibility is very important to me because it's important that my clients get their answers when they need them. We have the resources of a larger firm because we have such talented people that work here, but they get me from the beginning to the end. A lot of firms, will have different attorneys represent them in different things or whatever. We have more of an old school sense of that thing. So they get me from start to finish. And it's interesting because you really can achieve a compelling relationship over time with somebody. And that kind of nuance, I think, is helpful. A trial won't occur till several years after the incident, probably. And the fact that I know somebody really gives me a boost in being able to present their cause because I have a sense of who they are. So you just asked me a little bit about my background. So I was raised in the Midwest until I was 15 years old. I lived in 5 or 6 different states in many towns. My dad was, shall we say, restless. I ended up going to high school in Fort Lee, New Jersey, actually moving from South Dakota to Fort Lee, New Jersey when I was 15 years old. I then decided to go to Rutgers College in New Brunswick, New Jersey. And then after graduating Rutgers College, I went to what was then called the Delaware Law School in Wilmington, Delaware. And thereafter, my evolution led me to Philadelphia. And so we have an office in Bala Cynwyd, Pennsylvania, and we also have an office in now Marlton, New Jersey.